Sometimes you randomly click on something on Crunchyroll and you immediately are so interested by its existence that you have to talk about it. So here's me talking about the first episode of Zenshu. We open on the shot of the main character's peg bar, which, as opening shots go, is not bad. It's something she would use for her work, considering it's used to hold animation paper together, and it will come back as an important device later. She then starts narrating her own life, which isn't my favorite way of exposition, but I'll give stuff like this a pass at the start. One advantage of the start of a story is that most audience members will be quite open to exposition and might be willing to forgive an info dump if it helps to bring everyone on the same page. As long as characters don't mention information to other characters in a way that makes no sense in their context, you can get away with quite a lot. So, considering these are her inner thoughts, this is fine. The same happens in Kaiju No. 8, for example, when the main character is introduced in that show. Not only that, she is thinking about how she got here and the success she had along the way, until now. This means that the thoughts of her life story match up with the situation she is in currently. Her drawing changes into a fully fledged character in just a few frames. It is a nice way of showing her animation coming to life, almost literally, as we transition into a scene from her TV show. While this happens, we get her backstory in a short amount of time. She started as an animator, got better, became an animation director, went on to do storyboarding, became an episode director, and finally a director of a TV series. A series which I recognized as a reference to Sailor Moon, something I still haven't watched. She goes on. Her next work is an original rom-com film called Hatsukoi, First Love. A release date has already been confirmed, and the poster is done. She says that no doubt it'll be a hit, a new masterpiece. But it's not even out yet. So the first time I watched this, I was wondering if she's just overconfident, or maybe the world has hyped up her product and she is more cynical. Turns out it is the second reason, because she ends the narration with, or it should be, while she crosses out her storyboard. This ends the prologue. So far, this is a pretty strong start to a series, even though a better show could have worked her backstory into the main story, but whatever, it might trick people like me into watching more. Ooh, a show about animation? I liked Shirobako, I guess, and recently watched Eizouken, which was amazing, so I'm up for more well-animated anime about animation. But, dear viewer, this is a seasonal anime in current year, where dreams come to die. As she stands up, everyone in the office watches her for a split second before going back to work, which I admit is a nice story detail because it will happen 2 more times and means something slightly different each time. We get more info on it in a second, but everyone is anxiously waiting for the storyboard to be done. Some bitch walks into the office with bags asking if the first half of the storyboard has already been finished. This character has to be annoying on purpose because my god, I've never wanted someone to choke on a poisoned clam so hard. I find her voice extremely irritating, so every word that comes out of her mouth is just grating. And I don't mean just the way she speaks, but also what she says. She has no tact whatsoever, and worse, will be used to spout expository dialogue that will make no sense in context. It is only this first sentence and the next one that makes sense in universe and adds character. She's the only one to bluntly and explicitly ask Natsuko how far along she is. The rest of the people interacting with her are too timid to get to the heart of the matter. Natsuko responds by putting up her hoodie to hide her face, which makes the bitch react with, "Oh, there's your face." This is the second and last sentence that makes sense in context, because it means that they're used to this kind of reaction from her. The bitch then says, "Your skills always start to shine when you're at the absolute limit. I know that." Holy fuck, what shit dialogue explaining something Natsuko would already know and would not help in this situation at all. So it is meant for the audience. But not only that, it starts to reveal a giant writing problem we'll discuss later. For now, just think about what this says about Natsuko as a person. The bitch wants Natsuko to check her passport expiration date because they'll be traveling around the world for her debut movie. She blows her off by saying she needs to concentrate and hides herself further away from the world with her headphones. Again, atrocious writing coming from this sad excuse for a character. The project has already been announced. It's in production. There would have likely been meetings to handle practical things like passports. It's obviously meant to put pressure on Natsuko to work on the storyboards, but it just doesn't make sense in this context. The bitch then says she'll put the packed lunch away for her to eat later, and while she walks away, 2 guys are laughing, which she shuts down because the great director is working on a smash hit, which is again bullshit coming from her because she makes more noise than they do. Besides that, it is more pointless dialogue because the 2 co-workers obviously know what she's working on, and Natsuko just put on headphones anyway. She's not done talking, sadly, and says this film will make them 10 billion yen. Which would be about $100 million. So again, this is such bad writing. Why say that here with Natsuko present? What if the project is not that big of a success? Then you just look like an asshole, which, granted, would fit her character. And why would you say that to her co-workers? They're not gonna see much of that money anyway. Besides, this is something the production side of the company would discuss in meetings. It's another dumb line to put pressure on the whole project, but it makes everything just more unbelievable and it makes her even more annoying. You might say, but Leo, she's supposed to be annoying. Fantastic argument, but remember, deliberately annoying is still annoying, and it doesn't excuse the poor writing. She then gives the bags of packed lunches to one of the co-workers and explains there's old lunches with clams past the expiration date mixed with the new lunches and they have to throw the old ones away. This is where all my alarm bells went off. Oh no, this might be an isekai, a very badly written one at that. Fuck, I've been tricked. Twice actually. First, tricked into thinking this show would be good, and second, tricked into thinking this would be about anime production. But let's go back to this line of dialogue. How fucking stupid and useless are you? If there are expired lunches in there, why didn't you throw them away? Why are they in the same bag with new lunches at all? The obvious answer is that the story wouldn't work otherwise, but I hope you all understand that writing like this is inexcusable. It is super lazy. Another lady, presumably a production assistant, comes in with the keyframes for the promotional video, which gets me wondering what the whole order of this production schedule is. Natsuko doesn't even have a storyboard ready, but someone else already made keyframes for the trailer? Is this normal? If yes, what a shit way to do business. No wonder everyone is overworked in the industry. Oh hey, animated by Mappa. How fitting. But if it isn't a normal order of business, this show is nonsense. But what's even worse comes after. She rejects all the keyframes and says they have to be fixed. She doesn't say how or why, so this is failure number 1. She offers to do it all herself, which is failure number 2, because the production assistant says that the president told them she cannot do any other work until the storyboards are done. At least the president of the company made a sensible decision. So again, I ask, is this normal? A director who cannot give directions on keyframes for a trailer for a movie that hasn't even been storyboarded? What the hell? If yes, the industry is fucked. If no, this show makes no sense. In both cases, she comes off as incompetent and an asshole. She just made more work for everyone. If all the keyframes have to be redone, it's tons of work for the other artists, especially because she didn't say what's wrong with them. And if she does them herself, the storyboards will stall even more, meaning more work for the rest of the studio later in the process. Then we get more terrible exposition between two co-workers, that she isn't cutting her hair until the storyboards are done. They work with her, so they would obviously know the director, meaning this is dialogue only meant for the audience. Again, she exposits more stuff that the other guy should already know. The whole production is late already, but somehow the genius director will make it work. Aside from this dialogue not making sense, it's obviously meant to put pressure on her as a director, and I assume we're meant to feel for her. But I just come away with the feeling that she's terrible at her job and has no self-awareness. While on a break, she is scrolling through her phone and finds a story of Kametaro Tsuruyama, a director known for the film A Tale of Perishing, who's died. Reading this, she falls over and everyone watches her again, but as soon as she picks up her phone, everyone is going back to work, which I think is a decent joke. The first time she got up, her co-workers had the same reaction, hoping she'd be done with something, and immediately went back to work when they saw she hadn't. This time, they're presumably responding to the noise of her falling down and go back to work as soon as they know she's okay. She reads in the obituary that it might be food poisoning. The death of the director gets her mind going, so we get some more of her thoughts, which is exposition that at least fits the context of the scene. It's someone she looked up to, made one of her favorite movies, and might be a huge part of why she got into animation in the first place. It's enforced by a poster hanging in their studio. Again, nothing too offensive in terms of writing here. But don't you worry. That will come later. Distracted, she grabs the wrong lunch, which no one threw away, by the way. Just reminding you of the fact that this story simply cannot happen the way that it does. Before she starts eating, the production assistant comes back to ask if she would consider someone else doing the storyboards, which she declines. One of the co-workers then responds by saying, "Get over yourself and don't act like you're making this on your own." Finally, another decent line, because it is true. Instead of taking this criticism like a normal person, she responds angrily. This gets the guy to back off immediately, which I find baffling. If it is supposed to be comedic, it just just doesn't work as a joke. First of all, he's right. Secondly, the more she delays, the worse it will be for everyone, including him. Thirdly, if you made that first remark, why would you back off immediately as soon as she responds negatively? Wouldn't you expect a response? But most importantly, this is another stain on the protagonist. She has no self-awareness at all. She's making everyone's work life more difficult by being extremely incompetent and difficult herself. The guy tries to find a way out of this, so he switches by pretending to talk to someone else. This deflection makes no sense either. He tries to tell a guy off for making a cup of ramen by himself. What? Who would be fooled by this? Well, our protagonist, apparently. During lunch, she watches part of the movie A Tale of Perishing, reflecting on it as a work of art. This is fine, considering one of her heroes just died and this movie clearly inspired her. She tells us the movie was very depressing and didn't do well with critics and audiences. She doesn't fully understand it either. She speculates on who Luke Braveheart, the protagonist, would play in the live-action version. Ooh, yikes. Don't get excited for any live-action adaptation of any animated work. But whatever, she tries to think of an actor's name but cannot quite get it. It is then that she chokes on her expired food and says the name of an actor. Kaname Yun. Wait, does she choke? This is weird, considering it should be food poisoning, which would be a slower death than what we see here. Oh wait, I forgot. The people writing this cannot write anything that makes sense, and we have to get to the isekai part as soon as possible. The bitch comes back and keeps shouting to Natsuko instead of checking what's wrong with her. It's fitting for her character that she is completely useless, because she could have tried to check up on her and use those precious seconds to immediately call an ambulance, or use that grating voice of hers to tell someone else to call one. So let's go over the events that had to happen for her to die here. Someone brought lunch into the office, including expired lunch. Instead of getting rid of it herself, she tells others to do that. Instead of them getting rid of it, it is just put to the side. And then Natsuko has to be distracted enough by something else not to notice what she grabbed. To be clear, this is a plot hole, built upon a plot hole, built upon a plot hole, built upon a contrivance. This is bottom of the barrel tier writing. Through the flipping of animation pages, we flash through Natsuko's life until she's in the cinema watching the movie. Again, the animation and presentation is solid. It's just a shame that the writing is so atrocious. She then wakes up in the movie. She doesn't know it yet, but it's obvious to the viewer, even without knowing anything about the blight that is Isekai. She gets attacked by one of the creatures from the film before being saved by Luke Braveheart himself. An elf that's very good doujinshi material, My Little Pony, and a fucked up looking bell toy. I love fucked up looking bell toy, and we'll get to why later. But now he simply says the void has been destroyed and the void presence is 0%. This is at least some dialogue that makes sense in context and tells us something about the world. Fucked up bell toy can detect the presence of enemies, at least for now, and they are safe, at least for now. Luke asks her if she's trying to die, which is a decent line considering she just died. It's only decent in isolation though, because I've already discussed how that death makes no sense. She is still trying to figure out where she is when My Little Pony and Doujinshi Elf join the team. She introduces herself as Hirose Natsuko and asks for a phone, but Luke just immediately gives her advice. When you hear the siren, you have to take shelter. This is some decent characterization of Luke. He wouldn't understand what a phone is anyway, and instead tells her how to avoid danger in the future. It shows his priorities, keeping people safe. When My Little Pony transforms into My Bigger Pony, Natsuko is still wondering what's going on, while the team hop on and fly back. The black-haired gremlin, as she is now called, has to walk. This seems kind of a dick move, but on the other hand, they don't recognize her as human, and she came off as a little ungrateful. But on the other hand, the rest of her body still looks very human, and it wouldn't be that much trouble to give her a lift to the village, right? This is one of those jokes you're probably not supposed to think about for too long, because it starts to fall apart. In that case, it fits the show very well. She then gets to the town full of generic-looking fantasy creatures. I bet you could swap this out for tens, if not hundreds of other shows with marketplaces in towns like this. If you remove recognizable main characters, of course. I haven't even watched many isekai, and even I can see the generic background characters already. Except for this magnificent specimen. Holy, that pink moustache would probably do very well with the ladies. I bet he gets to eat a lot of clam. The heroes for whom a party is organized are called the 9 soldiers, but we've only been introduced to 4 of them, which is some nice intrigue for later episodes. Natsuko recognizes the mayor from Last Town, as well as Elder Baobab. What the fuck, who will offer us some wisdom. She prophesizes the 9 soldiers' importance in stopping the void, and Natsuko starts to realize she knows all the lines. She understands what's happening and storms up to Luke to ask if he's really him. When he confirms, she starts speculating on what happened. Firstly, that this is not really an isekai because she's in an anime movie. Yeah, nice attempt to stand out from the rest of the isekai swamp, but this is, for all intents and purposes, an isekai. She thinks about why she was reborn, because she's not a shut-in or a need and had a successful career, which is an attempt at meta-humor. Oh yes, very original for the genre, or setting, or tumor, or whatever you want to call this. She then remembers what happens in the story, a void attack on the village as her stomach growls. It's another attempt at comedy that will fall flat soon. She explains what's going to happen, but they don't believe her because fucked up Beltoy doesn't sense anything at the moment. She says he's charging and will always be charging when he's needed most. So does that mean the badly written show we're watching now is about a girl being transported to another badly written show? That's interesting, but regardless, Natsuko has now wrapped her head around what happened and is trying to save the people here by warning them. Finally, something that shows she's not a complete dick. Oh, wait. My Little Pony doesn't take any of this bullshit and tells her off, but she responds by taking him by the horns and flinging him around. This again confirms she is an asshole. She is stopped by Luke, one of the few decent characters left in this show. Her stomach keeps growling 5 times, and she is trying to argue that he's a bad hero for not providing her food. This is where the joke starts dying. She just remembered what is going to happen and is immediately distracted by food. You know many are going to die, so if you were anything resembling a decent person and not some morally corrupt asshole, you should use everything in your power to try to convince them. That would lead nicely into the next scene, but because they don't do that, the scene after this makes no sense either. Luke grabs the food away from her and says he is hungry because he had to rescue some fool in the desert. I wouldn't be so kind as to use the word fool, but still, he's at least responding appropriately. She's then arrested and still wants to eat. You could easily have written it so that she comes off as a crazy person trying to tell the future about how they're all going to die and have that be the reason why she's hauled off. But no, it's because she's annoying the heroes and wants their food. Besides, she's not locked up or chained at all, she's just put off to the side. So obviously that doesn't make sense either, but it would again be a nice moment for her to continue convincing people what's going to happen. But she doesn't. Well, it's going to happen anyway. After the clocks sound an alarm, fucked up Beltoy senses the void with 100% certainty, and this has to be a joke, which I admit I like. A character who can sense danger after it has been signaled by someone who presumably spotted it and rang a big bell. So far, he's been quite useless. The only useful thing is him confirming at the beginning that there were no other void creatures left, so they knew they were all safe. My Little Pony says, let's wrap this up quickly and go back to partying. Natsuko says to herself, there's the death flag. Again, an attempt at meta-humor. Luke asks how many there are, and fucked up Beltoy fails to calculate. A nice detail, by the way, is that void creatures disappear into a void. She sees the rest of the story unfold in her mind and thinks she can't do anything. Well, you had multiple chances to try to help by convincing them. For example, proving you know what's going to happen by pointing out details no one could possibly know. But as we've already established, you're a cunt. So you didn't. Her pack bar talks to her and tells her to draw. My Little Pony pulls Luke back, puts him into a shield with Dojinshi Elf and fucked up Beltoy and plans to sacrifice himself. Natsuko then figures out what to draw, which gives us a fantastic magical girl-like transformation. Again, the animation team can show off their talent. It's also the first time we see her face, and damn, you look good. Shame you're a piece of shit. After she draws the keyframes, she summons a monster, which is an obvious reference to the giant from Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. The monster retains the style of her drawing while it is summoned, which is another animation detail I appreciate. It fires a beam in the same style as the movie it's referencing, after which fucked up Beltoy confirms pony safety and 0% void creatures. I love him, he's so useless. Then Natsuko falls down, but Luke catches her and sees her face. My Little Pony is happy to have defeated all the void, and again I have to commend the animation of his smug little celebratory dance. And the animation is the only thing to appreciate about this first episode. Natsuko is a horrible character. Now let's be clear, a protagonist can be flawed, even to the point of being an asshole. That's fine, because a viewer could then recognize those flaws and watch the characters deal with that. They could overcome those flaws or struggle with the consequences of their actions. But that doesn't mean you can get away with anything by simply proclaiming this protagonist is flawed. Not only that, but there should actually be consequences. Let's examine why Natsuko and the show she is in is way too poorly written for this to be a compelling character I would want to follow on a journey. She cannot direct, even though that's her job. she cannot work together with people on an animation project, which is baffling considering it is an example of a work environment where everyone is a vital link in the chain. Well, except for this bitch. She seems to have no use whatsoever. She should at least understand how animation works because she worked herself up through that chain, from animator to storyboarder to animation director and now to director. All are jobs which rely heavily on everyone else's hard work. But now that she's in the directing position, she seems to have forgotten everything. Best faith interpretation of the movie that has been announced is that she, or someone else, at least wrote the script and designed the characters, which is why the project has already been announced, why there's a poster, and why others can already work on a trailer. That wouldn't be the order I would do business in, but hey, I'm not a part of the anime industry. It wouldn't surprise me if everything they did in real life was terribly planned out as well. So, okay, let's assume her next step is storyboarding and that makes sense. If she cannot get this off the ground, why not organize brainstorming sessions? If she's the director, there should be others, like animation directors, who could assist her. Get others from the team involved. Just leave this bitch out of all the meetings. The whole project has ground to a halt anyway, so what do you have to lose? You might argue that this is her character flaw. She wants to do the most important work herself, but I refuse to believe that she would operate this selfishly when she's worked in the industry in different positions already. Besides that, she's already let someone else do keyframes for the trailer, which certainly should match the movie they're trying to make. This means the show has already acknowledged that other people are working on important parts of the story. It all just doesn't function, and the character flaw is fine, but this, for me, transcends into irredeemable asshole. Because when she gets called out on it, she handles it terribly. You've shown me a woman who's clearly talented and should know something about the industry, but is at the same time so dense and selfish that she jeopardizes everyone's jobs? I just don't believe it. So aside from not making any progress, making everyone's work more difficult, not reacting well to criticism when she gets called out for that, and not being able to work well with anyone, are there any other character traits? Well, yes. After she dies and gets transported, when she realizes this world follows the plot of the movie, she's distracted by food and has the audacity to call Luke out on his behavior. She tries once to convince people they're in danger, doesn't consider that she might come off as crazy, so she would have to change tactics in order to get through to them, and then switches the conversation away from the danger because she is hungry. It's not an exaggeration to say that everything she does or says is wrong somehow, either very poorly written or deliberate to make her the biggest piece of shit I've seen in a while. I just wouldn't want to follow this character on a journey of redemption, considering I have seen very little proof that there are consequences for her actions. When there are, for example when she's arrested for harassing people, she's not removed from the scene or locked up. That means that the quote-unquote consequence for her actions is inconsequential in the very next scene. So, are there any other characters we would want to follow? Well, certainly no one at the animation studio. What about the movie world? Luke Braveheart is a little generic, just his name alone, but he's at least likable. He's just here to rescue people and treats Natsuko as she should be treated. From his perspective, she's nuts. And an asshole. Fucked Up Bell Toy is my favorite. He has to be a joke, and I think it works. The pony is a little insufferable for my taste, but to be fair, what we've seen of him at least makes sense for the character. For example, he said he'd never done a destruction spell, which is another decent joke. It's not something you can practice more than once, but it also means that afterwards he can quite confidently claim he didn't know what happened, but he thinks it was him who saved everyone. He just didn't know how the spell worked. So, what about the other episodes? Yeah, what about them? I haven't watched them and I'm not going to. This first episode convinced me of a few things. I have no faith in the writing. It was shit before she died and it was shit after she died. She's not a character I would want to watch on a journey. I refuse to believe that the rest of the series will be well written. If you cannot even write a decent first episode, I base that mostly on the horribly written exposition and lack of her morals. It's just baffling to me that the animation team, the voice acting team and the sound team all, including music, are clearly talented people who did their job well, but the writing is just so awful, as is often the case in media, sadly. It has also convinced me not to watch any current isekai if I can avoid it. I watched the first season of the show that made this genre or setting blow up, being Sword Art Online. The writing in that is horrific as well, but at least the transport to the game world made more sense. You plugged into a machine to play a game, which transported your consciousness to the game world. This whole dying thing and then waking up somewhere has always bugged me. If the rest of this story is in the isekai world, it's likely it it won't be explained how she died, how she got transported, and how she got animation powers. It is such a lazy way to get a real-world character into a fictional world. The same happened with ReZero, of which I have also watched the first season. That story at least hints at the mystery behind his reincarnation, and considering it's still ongoing, we might get an explanation later. Maybe I'll be convinced to watch season 2 of that someday. Aside from that, I have watched Now and Then, Here and There, which was a decent story where the transportation was at least somewhat explained, and KonoSuba, which does not care about any explanation and just goes for comedy, which I liked. If your premise is stupid, get as much fun out of it as you can. And even those characters can be assholes, but have some redeemable qualities as well. If you have any other suggestions, I would love to read them in the comments. Just know that you have to do some real work convincing me to watch any modern isekai. But to be fair, the story could become more subversive. Based on this first episode, she could wake up in the hospital later and realize it was all a dream, after which she will be inspired to finish the storyboard. And we could go back to the animation studio, but I wouldn't hold out hope. The director who died also died of food poisoning, so she might have something to do with the reincarnation or show up later as well. It could also just be a little hint to what would happen later in the episode. Whatever they decide to do, I don't care. Closing off, what do we get out of all of this? Well, at least 2 recommendations. If you were tricked, like me, and now want to watch a good show about animation production, watch Eizouken. And considering it has been referenced already, just watch Nausicaa Valley of the Wind instead of this show. Then you can root for an amazing girl who is actually well written, quite complex, and marvel at some fantastic animation. As for Zenshu, it has solid animation but terrible writing, which damages the characters to such an extent that I don't want to watch any of them succeed. They can all choke on a poisoned clam.